Hey, welcome back this week to Navigating the Healing Path podcast, where this week Maggie and I are going to be discussing healthy detachment and letting go. Whew. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, these skills that so many of us did not acquire growing up, that we get to learn in our adulthood as we heal on this journey and create space so that we can feel good living our life and being inside of our bodies. And the two of those skills are detachment and letting go. So we would love it if you would stick around and join us. Okay. So, standard protocol. Let's breathe it out. Before any of these not the big heavy conversations, but just any kind of conversation where we want to speak from our heart, it's really nice to just take a moment and drop in. And our favorite way is through the breath. So let's breathe and connect. Deep one in. And again. It's amazing how the breath can create this space, this awareness, help draw your attention from your head down into your body. Gives you that little bit of relaxation. It's nice. Especially about something like this. Detachment to me, if I might just jump in.
Please, yes.
Detachment felt wrong when I first started doing this work. I thought that made me a bad person. It felt wrong. It made me feel cold, like I didn't care about my family who was struggling. But I have learned to see it differently. There is healthy attachment. We talk about this a lot, with children having healthy attachment. Can they be okay when you go? They might even have emotions and cry, but they can regulate quickly and be in the moment and go on playing, right? That's normal. That's good. That's fine. When you come back and they join you and they are excited to see you and they reconnect with you, healthy attachment. Detachment feels like the opposite of that. It's almost like, again, like it makes you bad or wrong because you don't want to connect with your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, whoever it is. It's not bad, especially if it's not a healthy relationship. If there's unspoken expectations or abuse or toxicity or manipulation, anything like that, choosing to be attached to somebody who's siphoning your energy, your attention, your affection for their benefit, not really considering what you're getting out of it, that does not feel good. So a lot of the work that I've experienced with detachment is learning to be okay with that. Now, just because I've detached from somebody doesn't mean that I can't connect again. Like if, for instance, my brother is going through something really hard because he's struggled his whole life, does it serve me and him if I am so enmeshed in feeling and, like what does that really serve? There's a lot of understanding. There's a lot of things that you can get from that. But ultimately, if I'm suffering, I'm not being of service. So I can allow him to go through what he's going through in his time on his journey, and I can offer support and ask questions. But it's important for me to remain emotionally disconnected, energetically disconnected, right? Because I grew up as a codependent. That wasn't a skill that I really had, and I had to learn that as I got older. Does this make sense so far?
Yeah. Do you mind if I
Please interject.
ask some questions? Okay. So pre-episode, we were chatting a little bit about this topic, And I was telling you that I feel like because of the stage that I am at in my spiritual emotional awareness work, I guess you could say, because I'm only a few years in, I'm still in the beginnings. And this concept of detachment and letting go feels like this really distant, like wise, older kind of practice. It seems like a later down the road kind of thing. So I don't know how much practice I personally have and knowledge and experience of learning detachment and letting go of certain things, or at least that's what the mind has been telling me. So, with this in the forefront of my mind, I guess I would love to ask kind of just some more blanket definitions like we do usually. And just, I would be curious to hear your basic foundational understanding of what detachment is, if there are different categories of detachment, like emotional, energetic, when and where it can be applied. And I guess kind of similar for letting go. And you've also important to note, you have really been practicing these last, well, I don't know how long, how many years, but it's really been
Yeah.
it's been one of your primary focuses
Yeah.
over the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
But really this last year, I would say. Is that
For
accurate?
sure. Yes.
Okay. So I would also love to hear your experiences and like what it's done for you, because this feels a little bit out of my realm. But yeah, are you down to share what your understanding is of detachment and the things that I said?
Yeah. So, from where I'm coming from, detachment is kind of a spiritual practice of non attachment. This is a big thing. Monks and religious organizations who have very little, they don't need a lot, right? They just have their basic survival things: shelter, food, companionship, community, faith, and stuff like that. They practice non-attachment to everything. It's a spiritual practice
This is big
because
in Buddhism, right?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not so well versed in all of the theologies out there, but that does make sense to me.
Mhm.
That does resonate. But there is this practice, even like shamanic, like not being attached to anything, because when you're attached to something, a person, a car, a house, a belief, a feeling, the moment it's gone, you feel emotions: anger, sadness, resentment, whatever the thing is that's going on that's relevant for you. So the practice of non-attachment is the inevitability, because life changes constantly. When that thing leaves, because everything comes and everything goes, when that thing goes, you're not upset. You're like, oh, my time with that is done. I hope the next person really enjoys it, right? It's this flow of you have it when you need it, and then it's gone when you don't, right? It's a very spiritual practice. So I had that as kind of like a foundation for me, so that I can be okay when things come and when they go, so that I would feel less hurt, right?
So is detachment, is it a coping mechanism?
I would actually say that. Sure, you can say that. Yes, because it was something that I practiced when I was in my transformation work years ago. We would do this meditation, and where you would be on a stage and you have every single person in front of you that you've ever met and ever known that has ever been in your life. And you can see that every single one of those people has a cord attached from them to you, whether it's in your heart or your solar plexus. I feel like mostly it's in the solar plexus, but it just depends on who that person is for you.
Mm-hmm.
But they are all connected to you somehow. And so you stand on the stage and you cut every single cord, and you feel free and you feel whatever you just feel like. For me, that was just like oh, it's just me now. This is just my energy. This is me. Because that was a lot of the work I was doing, is trying to figure out what was mine and what was not mine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's important to disconnect, to detach from everything and everyone, not permanently, temporarily, so that you can feel you and only you, and perhaps the supportive spirit around you, so that you can learn to navigate and identify and feel and do all of that without the external influence of society and family and work and all this pressure of ideas and beliefs of who you are, and instead just clearing the slate and being like, okay, what's here? Sometimes you can use it when you're in a relationship that is not the healthiest for you, or you're codependent, or something is going on, but you need to fucking deal with life and with what's in front of you, but you keep feeling being pulled energetically to somebody else's issues. That's a good time to practice detachment. Be like, okay, I can't do anything about this right now. I will call and support them later, but right now I'm going to focus on what's in front of me and be present. So sometimes detachment just helps you be present to the moment, because you're no longer carrying somebody else's burdens. So emotionally and working with my boundaries, it was a really helpful tool. And you can do this all the time. You can just sever the cord with thought, just cut it off. You can bring it right back just by thinking of them. You reconnect. Sometimes, and the people will feel it. I have heard this as well. Like when you emotionally or energetically disconnect from somebody with your mind, thoughts, and intentions, they'll feel it, and oftentimes they'll reach out to you because they felt that disconnection. So sometimes you can even have it be a little more secretive, like, because, you know, it's not always safe to share some of these healing processes with people who have harmed you and have want to keep taking energy from you.
Right.
When you imagine the connection between you with that cord, you can place a mirror in front of you where that cord is. And to their perspective, they're still connected to you, but you cut it behind the mirror. Right? So they have the illusion and the feeling they're still connected to you, but you emotionally and energetically are not connected anymore. You have that like placeholder, if you will. But again, a little mental magic. These are things you could do in meditation or in a moment after you've grounded, and just setting your boundaries up and being like, this is mine, that is theirs. This is mine, that is theirs. And you can just, you know, it is a bit of a protection. But ultimately, it didn't feel good getting upset when other people are telling their stories that are hard.
The emotional attachment and the empathy.
It wasn't actually helping. I was just suffering alongside of them. But after a while, and you get practiced at this, the empathy doesn't go away. I still relate. It still resonates. I can notice it inside of me, but the emotional attachment isn't there.
Right. It's not yours to carry.
Exactly. But I can still feel it. It still gives me information, and I can, you know, share what I'm seeing, feeling, and all of that. But emotionally, I'm not wrapped up in it. I don't know how to define enmeshment. This is a big psychological word, but we can gather the meaning is like we are enmeshed with another person. And it's hard to determine what is yours, what is mine, because it's all interwoven. And so as we become full, whole humans on our own, we do recognize that we are connected to the universe and everybody else, but almost like in this more healthy way, a more in alignment kind of way, and not woven in knots and, you know, manipulation kind of thing. Like if that gets pulled, it's going to tug me over there, you know. Instead they can pull and I can feel the pressure, but I'm like, I'm not going to move unless I choose to.
Yeah. The weaving feels like this subconscious, non-consensual agreement, weirdly, that really is not, it really doesn't feel as healthy and aligned as having a bit of healthy detachment, interestingly. Like, it really does feel different. Because, yeah, I have quite a bit of enmeshment in my past with family and friends, and thinking about the work that I've done over the last few years, which I think I am going to correct myself, because the way that you've explained these things, I'm like, oh, perhaps I have
I was waiting
practiced some
because
detachment.
I knew I was waiting. I was gonna tell you. I was gonna reflect to you where I was. No, I actually wasn't. I was gonna ask you questions so that you can get there. But you got there. You got there. So go ahead.
Yeah, especially with like when you mentioned the cord cutting and
Uh-huh.
the energetic practices, and even just shielding and protecting myself, that feels like a form of detachment to just stay in my own energy. But enmeshment feels very, yeah, just very like non-consensual and
Sticky.
Yeah, it's quite different from.
It's hard to get out of it.
Yeah.
You know.
Anywho, just wanted to
Yeah.
validate that point.
Awesome. And I have seen you detach. Not in like necessarily globally or like the grand scheme, but like in small, subtle ways as you've been holding space for yourself. We detach from caring about what other people think. You know, as we practice being our authentic self and just showing up, and how they respond is that's all theirs. That's not mine. What people think of me is none of my business. You know, because it's not really me. I'm just reflecting something that they like or they don't like. Either way, that's theirs. If it's something that they like, I love that. I'm reflecting their love, their light. If they're seeing something they don't like, that's just the shadow. And that's not me, though. I am the light. I am not the shadow. I can live in shadow. I am friends with shadow. Everything is created and birthed in shadow, in the darkness. It is part of the universe, and I fully accept and embrace that, but I am the light. So if you reflect the love and the light to me, fucking joyful. I'm so glad you can see that. But everything else, none of that's my business. You know? And this is a lot of how this work has been helpful for me, because detachment leads to neutrality. And neutrality for me is where it's all at. You know, being neutral, because that's baseline. That's like a peace, right? Neutral is peace to me. And then if I'm peaceful, or I'm just neutral throughout my day, or I'm working with somebody and then something comes up, it's easier for me to distinguish and determine what is going on if I'm already clear. If I don't have anything else gumming up my system or clouding my vision. If I'm healthily detached but lovingly connected, right? I can be in this neutral space where I am of better service, because I can see clearly, I can understand, I can listen and receive the messages easier, so that the words can come out that needs to be in the space for the person to receive. And there's no need, right? When you're attached, when you're meshed in someone, you need something, validation, affection. They need to show you your value or build you up. And it's like you're borrowing power.
A form of control.
Or comfort, security, you know? And again, there's nothing wrong with any of this. I never come from this is right or wrong. I only share what feels good in my body. And for me, being detached from everybody is helpful because I am so sensitive. And it did not feel good to feel everything so deeply. But it was only showing me an unhealed aspect of my past. So that's good, ultimately. The triggers indicate where you're connected, like where you're attached to something, a thought, a belief, ultimately. So much of this is about beliefs. So much of it.
Yeah.
What do you believe about yourself? Because you hear this thing, nobody can offend you without your permission. Have you ever heard that?
I have, yeah.
Isn't that annoying? I used to fucking hate that.
Yeah.
I'm like, nuh-uh. But all the books I've ever read is like, if you get upset about that statement, there's somewhere inside of you that believes that is true. And that's a hard pill to swallow. That is a difficult thing to look at. It's not easy, which is why it's helpful when it's coming from somebody who's loving and supportive and caring and open, but oftentimes it comes weaponized with someone who's trying to get something.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. So, yeah, detachment. I used to try to talk about this with some of my family, and she couldn't do it. Parent child is so hard. It's a hard dynamic and roles to play. But there has to come a time when you need to let go of your children, and they need to be on their own, and they need to make their quote unquote mistakes. But I don't actually believe in mistakes. I believe in lessons, you know? So it also just depends on your perspective. Mm-hmm. Do you live in fear or do you live in love? Again, things to look at. What are your beliefs? Beliefs have power. Beliefs can also be extremely limiting. So I've just been trying to release a lot of that so that I can be more open to more and more possibilities of grace and abundance and joy as I heal all of this pain and suffering I've carried around with me, unexpressed emotions that have lived in there that affect me on this subconscious level. This is just for me part of that work, detaching from the old identities. That is not who I am. That might have been who I was growing up because that was a survival mechanism. That was how I coped. That was how I learned to deal with it. But as an adult, and we become autonomous and responsible for ourselves and owning our hurt and healing our own hurt, no longer blaming the world, our family, but seeing how we were part of it, willingly or not. It's really helpful.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, cool. Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's helpful. Maybe the reason why I felt like I wasn't as practiced in detachment is I think I have had that enlightened Buddhist monk image in my brain of just detachment and letting go, and nothing at all affects me. And I live in this beautiful, happy space all the time where I'm living this beautiful spiritual internal life, and I am barely of this physical earth. And I guess that concept to me feels unattainable.
It's a bit unrealistic in modern society.
Yeah. And we're humans. Mm-hmm. Even if we are a spirit having a human experience, we are still of the human experience. And I do have another question, if you're open, if you didn't have any questions.
Of course.
Okay. So since we are here to experience the human experience, and with being a person comes a lot of not so great feeling things, that's a part of the agreement and a part of the lessons. And detachment and letting go, it does feel to me like some people, especially in the spiritual community, it does feel glorified to me. I feel like that's a lot of where like the toxic positivity kind of comes from, is talking about love and light and not being attached. But it feels like bypassing to me. So as you've been navigating these practices and using detachment as a bit of coping mechanism for the suffering that you've faced, what is the line between practicing healthy detachment, whether it's in your relationships, whether it's you doing body and energy work for someone, or just attachment to the physical realm and the experience of being a human? Like, what's the line between healthy detachment, if there is a thing, and what is bypassing and escapism from reality?
Ooh. I hear discernment coming through. This is up to you to figure out what is in your highest good. The healing journey is an individual, unique thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? One tool that works for someone might not be the tool that someone else needs. There is a difference between avoidance, repression, detachment, but I feel the answer is, does it serve your highest good? Honestly, sometimes checking out playing a video game for 20 minutes just to release some stress and turn the brain off is great. You know what else does that? A 20-minute meditation. But then you're facing it. But sometimes you do, if you're overstimulated and you just can't do it, that's fine. That's healthy. It's when it becomes chronic or harmful to you.
Mm.
You know, kind of like medicine and poison are the same. It just depends on the dose. You can poison yourself with something if you overdo it. If you take a tiny bit of it, like homeopathically or like a microdose or whatever, it's actually really beneficial. The poison is in the dose.
Mm-hmm.
How much are you avoiding? How much are you distracting and disconnecting from yourself? Mostly, because that's really what that is, because you're uncomfortable feeling your own feelings. So you're going to distract yourself or you're going to repress it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not healthy, right? So, but there is an appropriate time where sometimes you just can't deal. Like you're overloaded, you're overstimulated, overwhelmed, and you need to regulate. So go regulate. But that's what the coping tools are for, is to help you do that so then you can face it again. The way that I feel about detachment is it can give you perspective, right? If you're enmeshed and you're really close to the situation, you can only see like this much, like a foot, right? You can only see a foot in front of you because you're so close to it. Someone comes to you with a problem and you're so in it with them, you can only see what they're showing you. But if you allow yourself to be detached, you can come out a little bit, have a greater perspective, and then ask the questions. Like, so you can bring some light. Like, well, what do you mean about that? Because you want to understand them. And so you even help them through your questions in this loving, neutral space that you're holding, that they can then begin to look at it themselves and like, well, hold on, let me see where you're standing there, or let me look at it from your perspective, right? It gives you more distance from the problem so you can see the whole thing and not this one tiny little part of it.
Mm.
Like the one little tiny part, it's messed up right here, but if you can get out far enough, you can see the actual problem is way over here. But you fix this problem way over here, it's going to relieve the pressure of right here, right now.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is healthy. And I hear you about the spiritual bypassing. I do not agree with that. I think it's a good intention to be in love and light as much as possible, because that's part of what's going to help heal and evolve us as humans, so we can treat each other with kindness and live through our hearts. That's great. But we still need to feel the feelings, and we need to accept everything that is without needing to control it or push it away or repress it. Out of sight, out of mind. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's still not there. If you haven't actually processed it, if you haven't felt it and gone through and gained the lesson, because that's really what all this is trying to show you something. It's either trying to show you your own strength, your own courage, your own ability to heal. That's really what a lot of this does for me. Build your confidence. It helps. It just helps a lot with healing.
Mm.
But that's a hard question to actually answer, because it just depends, you know?
That's fair.
It's just sort of like, how do you use your tools? Like manipulation is a tool. You can use it for good to help your children develop healthy hygiene habits, like brushing their teeth and taking showers. You know, you manipulate them with fun. Like, let's play in the bathtub. Let's have these bathtub crayons, or let's make a game, or I'll play a song and you brush your teeth until it finishes. But that's the positive pole of it. The opposite pole of manipulation is emotional manipulation, where somebody has to sacrifice something, or like, that is weaponized. Everything can be either or. That's the polarity. That's the duality of this world, of this universe.
Right.
And it's like, there is this line that you get to skate of like, how do I want to use this? I have this tool. I can use it for a low frequency or a high frequency. That was all I got.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now that we've had this part of the conversation, and you have a wider view of what I'm talking about with this.
Yes.
So how can you reflect back and see where you have been practicing detachment?
I think the first thing that comes to mind has been the work that I've done around my codependent nature. Don't love that wording. Around my habitual codependence. That's what I was used to operating in my relationships. It was codependence, enmeshment. And I guess a lot of the work that you and I have done together, especially through meditation, over the last few years has been protecting myself and shielding myself and learning to discern what is my energy versus what is somebody else's, and where am I taking on somebody else's burdens or hardships and confusing them as my own and my own weight to carry in my backpack. So yeah, I think a lot of relational, energetic detachment.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you detached from any old identities that you used to think of who you were? Any old identity program or patterns that just you let go of?
Old identities. I think I have shed a lot of identities as I've grown into, I guess, a different person than I would have thought I would be. But I don't know how much of that happened on a conscious level. I think it was just kind of like a natural shedding and releasing.
Yeah, it's part of the process.
Yeah. I guess the most prominent one, or like recent one, is the identity of working in the film industry. I thought I was gonna be a professional director of photography for a long time. I have a bachelor's degree in film production with an emphasis in cinematography. I worked a lot in the lighting and camera departments over the last 7-8 years or so. And that dying of that self that I envisioned for a long time, that identity has really been shedding, releasing from me. Was that your question?
Yeah, I would say being a filmmaker is an identity. And you have been...
In the traditional way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you've been detaching from that as a career.
Yeah.
Not saying it's still not going to show up in your life. It's going to come where it needs to come. Those skills are useful for you, though, in your own artistic expression, and not in service for anybody else for a paycheck at this time.
Yeah. I think on some levels I still identify like as a recovering codependent, but I think that one has
work in progress.
Yeah. That one's still
a big
shedding.
One. Yeah, no, that one, some of these take significant time. Not in spirit time, but in human time. It can feel like a long time.
Yeah.
But it becomes less and less. Like it fades.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't come up, and it becomes interesting when it does come up. And it kind of like has you evaluate your environment and who you're around and like, wow, I haven't seen that program in a long time.
Mm.
You know, so you reach these new layers.
Mm-hmm. Now I kind of feel like the list is too long. I feel like life is just this constant growing out of old identities and ideas that we have for ourselves. We're constantly shedding who we thought we were every single day.
I feel like healthy, that's a sign of health. When you're constantly growing and evolving and shedding and renewing and refining. That to me is good. I feel like disease, dis-ease comes in when there's stagnation, when we get stuck and locked in thoughts and beliefs and patterns and grooves, just going on automatic pilot. There's no living, it's just perpetual motion without thought.
It's hard not to identify and attach.
It is.
It's really feels like the human
part of the mind.
nature.
It's the mind. It is not the spirit. It is the mind. That is one of the jobs. And I feel like it's been a survival mechanism at some point.
Yeah.
You know? Because otherwise you get kicked out of the tribe.
Mm.
You know? Like if you didn't identify with this, you faced being ostracized.
Oh man. Okay. Well, you saying that brings up my other attachments and identifications that I've had. Yeah, it is a survival mechanism.
Right?
You know, that's how I feel, or how I've felt around my sexuality, which we touched on a little bit in the previous episode, or one of the previous episodes. Timing weird. I believe it was the Shameless in SoCal episode. Yeah, it's like that. My ego had the fear of being ostracized by like my family, my community, by others out there, and it's this attachment to, I guess, the people that, you know, we think we're supposed to be loved and accepted by unconditionally. There's so many attachments.
Oh yeah.
Oof.
Beliefs and identities ultimately feel really limiting. I heard this a long time ago. I don't have beliefs, I have ideas. Because ideas can change, ideas can evolve and shift and adapt. Beliefs feel hard. Beliefs feel rigid, written. This is it. It's never going to change. I believe this, you know? And that's a lot of what the work is, especially as with meditation as a tool of discovering, what does your mind identify you as? Who are you? I'm a people pleaser. I'm a good little girl. I'm a helper. I'm a codependent. But I'm also a bad person. If I don't do this, I'm bad if I do that. You know, these are all identities. If you do this, it means that. And that's not always the case. Those don't always serve you. If I'm going to be loved by God, I have to go to church. You know, I don't really, honestly, this might upset some people, but I don't think God cares if you go to church. A bedroom can be church. My healing studio here can be my church. You go to where you feel most connected to spirit. It could be nature. Nature is one big cathedral, you know? Oh, there's so much God there. It's everywhere. Look at the lakes. Look at the mountains. You can feel that. That's why there's so many like monks that live in mountains, because it's so amazing. But there's a lot of work, and I want to offer permission for people to let go of those identities, especially if it doesn't serve you. If it does not serve your highest good, then let it go. Because there's something better there for you. You can let that person go, that job go, those thoughts go. It comes in so many different formats. It's all of life is going to keep coming and showing you and asking you questions. Have you healed this yet? What do you think about that? How did you feel over there? And a lot of times the healing process is allowing yourself to go through it, right? To be in it, because it's information, it's data. This is the gift, which is the weirdest thing, but this is part of the gift of being alive. Because when we're spirit, when we're back at home, connected and with everything, it's everything everywhere all at once. All emotions, everything is happening simultaneously. We as humans have this particular gift to be able to have different combinations of emotions, having one at a time or a few or this or that, or just extreme joy, and it brings you to tears. Have you ever been so happy you cried? Because you just can't help it. The feeling just overwhelms you and it's just overflowing and just needs to come out with tears. It's amazing. That is life. That is feeling is life. Unfortunately, some of us also get stuck in feeling the negative feelings. It's a cycle. And it's these cycles, these patterns that we get to break through detachment from these coping mechanisms. If it is not serving us, if it is suffering, look at the suffering, feel it, honor it, go through it. What did you learn? What did you see? Document it. Write down your story in your journal. Share it with a friend. Have a podcast so you can practice sharing your stories with a friend. Whatever brings you healing. But just look and continue to let go of these identities. Unless this identity is based in love and light, it's all a lie. I think it was The Course in Miracles was talking about that. That was a good book. Yeah, I forget where I was going with that. But anyway.
Yeah. The way that you explained that, which I loved. I loved how you put all of that. It reminded me a lot of the work that Kyle Cease does.
Mm-hmm.
I so admire the work that he does and the way that he shows up for himself, because he explains how some days he just wakes up and he sits with whatever is in the moment. And he talks a lot about how sometimes he just cries for hours as this attachment, this identification that he once had at some point in his life. It needs attention, and it needs to be released and to ultimately die.
Mm-hmm.
And not dying in a
permanent
right
way.
Right, but in a releasing
mm-hmm.
of, I guess, the attachment to that particular identity or emotion that never received attention or love from a parent, and just allowing that to be grieved. I don't mean to be a negative Nancy or a downer in this episode, but a lot of detachment and letting go, to me, it just feels like it's bringing up the importance of allowing all of these identities and attachments that we have to die. It's like constantly learning to grieve and release and to be okay with these parts of ourselves dying and potentially being gone forever in that
mm-hmm.
particular way. Learning to hold space for that for ourselves, I think, is really what allows for living and for life to occur. And I have a question that I can ask if you have nothing in retort to what I've said.
I enjoy listening.
Okay. What has been coming to the surface for you recently that wants to be loved and ultimately released to die.
Huh. It's interesting. Side note. I love when you say you have a question, because I always pay attention to the thoughts and images that comes in, and oftentimes the answer is coming as you're asking the question, which is really funny.
That is really fun.
But as you were talking about Kyle Cease and his process of sitting there and releasing, one, I'm being reminded that tears are an amazing healer. And I know it feels like sometimes it will never end, but it will, I promise you. There are neurochemicals, there's chemicals that are released in your tears, stress hormones, and all sorts of things. That is the body's natural way to release joy and sadness and anger. I know people who cry when they get super angry. You know, they hate it because I'm not sad, I'm pissed off, but this is how my body responds to my anger, you know, which that's part of the discovery of self, is how your system works. When you're angry, what happens? When you're sad, what happens? You know, study yourself, be, you know, your own science person who's trying to understand this specimen. But as you were asking the question, I was being reminded of what it feels like to lose relationships. Like with the estrangement work, you know, there's a big rise in no contact between parents and children, and from both sides, depending on the struggles. But when you are no contact with a parent, or it's not good or healthy or what you've always envisioned to have a relationship as, oftentimes you have to grieve the loss of the fantasy, you know, the healing fantasy that your parent or your child will understand and they'll be there and it will be okay, and you know, you guys are going to heal and do all of this. And that's been something I have been working on for a few years and grieving it. The first couple of years was a lot of grieving because I tried everything I could to avoid estrangement and no contact. And literally, in my mind, I really did try everything I could. And when it became blatantly clear that that was not going to be possible, I was sad. I had to grieve the loss of the relationship that I had always dreamed of. And so recently, the work I've been doing is just making peace with what's possible. But I did have to do a lot of healing on my inner child, the little girl who just wanted nothing but her father's affection and attention and love without having to ask or fight or beg for it. So when something came up earlier this year when I'm like, I just want him to show up, and then it got flipped around, the mirror turned around, and it's like, well, how are you showing up for you? And I'm like, oh, fuck. Fuck, really? You're gonna pull that card out right now? Because you always hear around these circles, what you want to receive, you give. You give that to others.
Or to yourself.
Exactly. But a lot of times what you're doing is like, when you're giving that love to somebody, you're feeling the love. Whether they can receive it or not, hopefully they can, you're getting it because you're giving it. That's the thing. It's in the space. It's within you. But yeah, I needed to show up for me, which is why I did the artist way, and why I've, you know, been reading. I read like the Letting Go book, and I joined the estrangement community because I want to feel good and whole and valuable, and I want and just love myself. You know, I don't need it from anybody else. I don't need anybody to see me, but that was a big one. Always wanted to be seen and understood. But having a reasonable expectation is really helpful. I can't expect somebody to see me if they can't really see themselves. If they can't really look and be responsible for that, then they're not going to be able to really do that for me. So I'm not going to go there.
So the fantasy of what your child self always wanted out of a father.
Yeah. That I had to let go of.
That's the most recent thing that's been dying.
Gotcha. And I did. And I realized that over like the last few years, I was really mourning the loss of that relationship
Mhm.
because he won't talk to me. It is what it is, but I can be there for me, and I can reach out, and I can ask for help, and I can build my community. And these are the things that come from this. So in a way, as hard as all of this has been to detach from my father, truly, deeply, I have found myself growing and healing and connecting with an amazing community of support and people that will care for me, and I don't have to beg or ask. Like, they just call and check in, like, hey, I haven't heard from you, how you doing? You know? So it's really nice, ultimately. I don't mind where it's led me. But I also do know that a lot of what this is teaching me is how to heal and repair broken bonds. I don't know how yet. This is what I'm learning, is how to repair these things. So I'm here for the lessons.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
And it really sounds like this is something that you've constantly reminded me, and throughout this season of coping mechanisms and healing strategies, is that when we release, when we let go, we are making space for something higher and something more aligned to come in if we so allow. And so I'm happy to hear that as this part of you, this formative childhood part of you, has been being released and you're grieving the loss of that. On the counter side, you do get to experience loving community that shows up for you in ways that your dad never did.
Yep. You get it eventually if you open yourself to it. You know? If you have a need, you're allowed to speak your need. And if your caretakers or your family or anybody can't meet it, there's other places where it can be met. Whether you meet it yourself or you have a community of people that just do it for each other. You know?
That is showing up for yourself, by the way, is finding intentional community
Yeah.
to meet that need if you specifically can't. Yeah. I need that reminder that I don't need to do everything on my own, and that just seeking the comfort, looking for friends, looking for community, that is meeting a need for myself, but with others. Because we're an interrelational dependent species.
Yes.
So
yes.
Just throwing the reminder out there. Again, largely for myself.
You are not an island.
Nope.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. It's a big job. And I think a bulk of the healing is detachment of identities, of beliefs, of feelings, and all of that. And it's all well and good to talk about it, but there's a whole process to it. And this is another thing that is being taught more and more. And it's not hard. I mean, it's hard. It's challenging to go through, but it's really simple. Can we talk a little bit about the letting go process?
Yeah.
Would that be helpful, do you feel? Because right now we're just talking like conceptually. Like, because I've heard people be like, no, I'm over, I let it go. But there's something in me that's like, did you let it go or did you push it down? Like, which way did it go?
Right.
Did it go out of you and out into the universe or the earth, or did it just go inside? You know, which is also a universe.
Repression versus releasing.
Right. And I think there's some confusion in some people's systems of like, they think they let it go because they no longer have an emotional reaction to it, but they could have also just gone numb and just sort of like walled it off.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I'd love to hear the distinction and if there's a letting go process for you.
Because I knew I needed it, because I know I hold on to things. That was just sort of like what I was taught, and I've really been trying to let go. And I forget who brought it to my awareness. It might have been Polly. I don't remember who. No, I forget who brought it in. Maybe you can remind me. The Letting Go book by David R. Hawkins. I've talked about this, I think, before earlier in this season as a reference. I can't recommend it enough. It was a book that took a lot of years of awareness and reading and experience and then just put it into this beautiful little package and made so much sense to me because he goes over frequency of emotion, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole chart of the different emotions and what frequency they have. And because I love vibrational medicine and tuning forks, and I'm like, I'll bring it. And I've been trying to like grow my own resonance and frequency in general in my life and in my body, so because it's part of my healing art, if you will. So I was really wanting to know and understand. So thanks, Alex Majeski. That was my soul brother. I think he was the one who told me about this. He goes, I need to tell you about it. I've been listening to it again and you keep coming to my mind. Makes sense. Shout out, my friend. So I listened to the audiobook and I'm just like, gold. I love it. And I listened to the whole thing, but I'm like, well, where was the letting go process? Like, I really thought I missed something. So I got the physical book so I can go use it as a reference. I loved it that much. But it is so simple, but also really challenging to do. The first thing is notice and acknowledge the pain. You have back pain, a migraine, whatever is ailing you. You be with it without wanting it to change. Oof. Oh, what do we want to do? We want to run from everything. We want to run from pain. We want to drug ourselves. We want to drink ourselves into forgetting. Like, so much of this avoidant behavior is to avoid the feeling. But the key is to feel it without needing it to go away, because the body is trying to communicate with you. If you have kidney disease or colon issues, like digestive issues, whatever it is, the body, each different part of the body has a different communication, different emotions. I think it's the liver is anger. I think there's like a lot of, like hot livers, there's like a lot of repressed anger and stuff in that. And this is not my wheelhouse, so I don't want to speak too much on this, but different ailments mean different things energetically, emotionally, and all of this. And so a lot of this letting go process is feeling it, allowing it to go through you, non-attachment to what's happening. And if you allow that to happen, and there is a whole process, and please read the book, but there's questions you can ask yourself, right? So as soon as that feeling then goes away, then you go to the next layer. What's underneath that? Like, and then you begin to notice when you don't need it to go, and you're giving it its space to have its cycle, its pattern, and you're listening, right? And you're just being with it, it will leave. And then the next time it flares up, if you will, it's a little less. But you go through the whole process again. I don't need it to leave. I'm just going to listen. I'm going to be with it. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to feel this. What does it want to tell me? And then it goes away. And the next time, again, less and less and less and less. This is the process. This is the peeling away the onion layers. Every time you go over a process, you have less and less emotional attachment to it. So the body needs to say it less and less often in a lesser degree. It sounds really simple, but it's really challenging to enact and be with, especially because healing can be so inconvenient. It never has good timing. It always interrupts the worst things, But when the body wants to heal something, it wants it then. And learning to trust that timing, holding boundaries and giving yourself that self-care is really beneficial in the long run. And I use a similar practice when I do my own healing sessions. You'll recognize this as you acknowledge it. Like, I see you. You bless it. Thank you so much for the lessons and what you had to offer. And then you release it. And you can visually watch it go. Right? It's very similar. But what really hooked me with David R. Hawkins' book was not wanting it to leave. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. Like, I knew that somewhere. Like, I had heard that from somewhere, but then it just poof was gone. So I'm like, no, look at me. I'm totally zen. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to visualize it all going away. It's good, right? But you do need to feel it. That's part of it. That's why PTSD work is really hard, because you have to relive things when you're sharing, when you're feeling it, it's like you're going through it again. It's really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be scary and it's hard, which is why community, why therapists, why healers, why other types of support. Good book. It's a really good book.
Yeah, you've said really wonderful things about it for some
I
time
really
now.
like it. It helped me a lot understand, like, conceptually, or have like a slightly different, more scientific perspective of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells some like really good stories about how this process has helped. So if you want to like let go, but you don't really know how, this is a great reference book. Top notch.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking love it.
Yeah. As you were explaining all of that, I do very much understand our tendency to want to use spiritual coping mechanisms, especially, to bypass the true healing spiritual work, which is the hard work, is feeling the suffering, being with our pain, whatever the pain is that we experienced, big or small. Because, when you're going through some shit, it's really nice to just sit and meditate and connect and just not look at the thing, to avoid, to detach from whatever situation it is, because it's a band-aid, it's a quick fix. But learning to sit with the pain, what the fuck wants to do that?
I know, sounds like
It's
a
so
terrible
hard.
idea.
Yeah, and the main example that comes up, because I kind of stopped this practice, but for a while I've been trying on that theory that you mentioned of whatever physical ailment is occurring in your body. There's like learning to sit with it and be with it will lessen the pain, but it's always trying to give us information on like what's going on. And for most of the time that I've been having periods, I have had pretty painful cramps, more so than my mom or my sister has ever experienced. Like, if I do not take an Advil on like the first or second day of my period, that's usually when I'll get really bad cramps for about 24 hours on and off. Sometimes it can go longer. And granted, I know that this, I feel like, is a relatively short window of time, but they feel more intense than I think what you're normally supposed to feel. But yeah, if I don't take an Advil with ibuprofen, then I really can't function. Work has been very difficult to navigate, because without it, I cannot be productive. Like it's that painful. I need to be in bed, and usually like lying down doesn't like help. And I've been wondering for a long time why it is this way. But because of the world that we live in, it's like you have to work through it. You don't have a choice. The working world is made for men that do not have to deal with menstrual cramps. But as women, as a person who has a period, oftentimes we don't really have a choice whether we can take time off work or not. And because of that, I would take Advil. I would take a painkiller and just shove it away. And I would kind of get mad at it and be like, oh my God, like how inconvenient. How inconvenient is this natural, beautiful bodily process that's occurring?
That makes life possible.
That makes life possible.
Yeah.
And I would just shove it away, or I would be like, oh my God, how can you do this to me right now? And as the years went on, I feel like it would get more and more painful. And it still is not the easiest thing for me to navigate. But there was a time where I think it was earlier this year, I just felt so called to not, I don't want to take any painkiller this time. I just want to lie on my bed and I want to put my hands on my stomach over my uterus and just feel the cramps for as long as I can. And if I can't handle it, it's fine. I'll take the painkiller and I'll go about my day. Got to do what you got to do. But sitting there and feeling it and just being open to ask, what are you telling me? Like, what do you need? Where am I not showing up for you? And that completely shifted the relationship I have with my period. And in that particular moment, I noticed that after about 20 minutes or so of just feeling the cramps and going with the ups and downs, holding space for it really is what I think I was doing.
Yeah.
They lessened, and I actually just ended up falling asleep and taking a nap for a few hours. I don't recall them being too terribly painful after I woke up from the nap. I think later that evening I ended up needing to take a bit of something when I was out of that space, and I admittedly have not really continued this particular practice, but even just for that one experience, what you said was shown. Is that when you do sit with the pain, when you feel the pain, when you hold space for the pain, that's often all that it needs.
Just needs that attention and space to feel the relief.
Yeah. And the information I was provided in that moment was that I have, for a good chunk of my life, especially my young adult, early working life, has been in a very masculine, or more like toxic masculine way of repressing, shoving in a corner, dominating, not allowing for the flow and the grace of femininity and, yeah, just being in tune with my feminine aspect of myself. Like, that has been getting repressed. And I feel like that is what has been manifesting the painful aspect of my period for a long time. It's screaming at me, pay attention to me. I am a part of you. I want love. I want to be able to express myself. You shove me in a box. You call me names. You say that I'm not important. You call me inconvenient. You're not tapping into your regular creative flow. And so I'm going to make this flow very heavy and very painful because I don't have any other outlet of expression. And I just had my period and I took Advil because I was on a trip. But but damn, yeah, that book and the way that you explained it and everything, it's true.
It's
and
a
it's
lot
a hard
of the
truth.
work.
And we don't want to hear
A lot of
it.
the work is sitting with your feelings.
Yeah.
That's why journaling is a helpful tool, because it helps you get your feelings out of your body, out of your mind, through your arm, onto the page. You know, but just like everything else, we can overdo it and we can then just keep triggering ourselves. But if the intention is to release the emotions, then that's the intention. And you're not holding on, you're not identifying with it. You are not cramps. You know, you are not pain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is not you. So you don't need to identify with it. You're just acknowledging what is. And I like the insight that you had into it. And that is a practice. Although, you know, sometimes you have headaches because you're dehydrated. You know, so drink some water and be with it.
Mm-hmm.
How does your body feel about being dehydrated? Because I swear, if you listen to your body and it's like, this is the consequence of not drinking enough or over drinking yesterday, this is how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
maybe don't do that. Maybe drink some more water. Maybe take care of yourself, and you can avoid this kind of thing. But a lot of times, as a healer, I learned, because I experienced it firsthand, if the body brings up something for you to look at, and the person, the facilitator who's with you, sees that and acknowledges it, the body itself will be like, oh my God, you saw that? Oh, I can let that go now. And it will just release. It will be let go. It just wants acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So much of healing work is learning to sit in the shadow. Sit with your shit. Sit with the pain. Now, don't gobble it up. This is not a fucking buffet. You're going to make yourself sick and out of balance, which is why we sip. We do what we can, when we can, how we can. But also, what was coming up for me when you were sharing that, especially about the period, I don't think we're supposed to be super functional during that time. We're supposed to be resting. Our body is going through a process.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing going on inside of our system. I don't actually think we're meant to push it aside. I think we're meant to embrace it, which is why I don't know where I got this information, where I heard it, read it, what have you, but way back before modern civilization, when we were still in tribes and small villages and things, those who were menstruating, the women who were menstruating, went somewhere. Like there was a moon hut in the woods where you went for your cycle so that you can bleed freely and meditate and be with yourself and nature, right? While you go through this process.
Yeah.
And then when you're done, you come back to the village and you go back about your business.
Yeah. And then you have a great 2 weeks. So productive, on top of your game, all of the energy.
Like we have a natural cycle. And I think a lot of, unfortunately, the modern technology and society, especially with the toxic patriarchy, has brought that out of balance and has not honored the natural cycles of life.
Yeah.
They're trying to control everything, control power, control greed, control the weather, control women, control children, control, because they want to feel safe. Anytime someone's trying to control something, they want to feel safe because they don't feel safe because they're not empowered. And this is a way to become empowered. If you can learn to sit there in pain and be okay, do you know how powerful that is? Powerful to cry, to express yourself. It takes more courage to cry than to repress. It's admirable work, learning to heal and learning to let go of old identities that don't serve you, that were bequeathed upon you by ancestors and your people around you, your peers, your family. If that doesn't serve you, you don't have to take it. Unhooking it and decommissioning certain things is an effort, but it's doable. It's possible. With that commitment and practice of showing up for yourself, caring for yourself, it's not selfish. Because I tell you, the more I've learned to detach and be neutral, the better giver I am. I have more perspective. I have more wisdom. I'm connected greater. I can feel more. I can relate. I can communicate more clearly. I don't get so emotional or offended or defensive. Oh, defense is the worst. That shuts down everything. I heard this last week and I loved it. And I wrote it to somebody because I'm like, I love this. I think you'll need it too. And she goes, I read it like 20 times. Ideally giving leads to empowerment, not dependency. So there's a lot of people that give codependently because they feel guilty or they feel bad for them and they just give and give and give and give. And that just ultimately leads to that person being dependent on them to give him that thing. So giving, coming from the heart, coming from the love, should empower them to live their life, to be themselves. And I think that's a good idea to keep within. Why are you giving? Why are you doing this? are you giving enough to yourself? So I don't know why. That just wanted to be said. That just wanted to be said.
Cool.
I don't know why, but there we are.
Yeah. Are there any other final thoughts or ideas that you want to share on detachment and letting go before we wrap up?
No, I think that last little random piece was it. Yeah. The things that were coming through, because I had been thinking about this since yesterday. I just started to like listen and be like, what are we talking about? You know, just kind of opening myself. And it was the idea of detachment, of neutrality, of the book letting go, and just all of that. Like, it's good work. It feels so much better to not be emotionally attached to people. I can still do it. I can always pull that trick out. But does it serve me? Not often. Not really. It just sort of muddies the water a little bit. I can't see as clearly. I can't tell if this is mine or theirs. Like, it's not... I'm so much better about that now. I'm like, oh, I can tell. You know? You can become really practiced, and then you just, like, okay, that's theirs. I have to remind myself. It's good reminders, good practice. But yeah, no, I feel pretty complete with this. Thank you so much for the space and the questions. Always appreciate that.
Yeah, right back at you.
Is there anything else that you want to mention or say before we wrap up this episode?
I don't think necessarily like any piece of advice or like channeled anything specifically, but I just feel, I guess, inspired just to sit with me more, just to hold space, to allow things that have been repressed within me to come up to the surface so they can receive some love and die and be let go. It just, like, in a weird way, it just feels like all of life is just these small cycles and practices of allowing things within us to die.
I think it's healthy to let things die.
Yeah.
There's a cycle to everything.
Yeah.
I love that.
More meditation. As we always say,
Learning
everything
how to hold space for ourselves.
Yeah. If there's anything that anyone takes away from this podcast,
go meditate.
Go meditate. And by God, I need to hear that myself constantly.
Good reminder. That's also why it always comes up. Like, fuck, I need to meditate more.
Yeah. Yeah. Just sit in silence.
Yeah, and be with yourself.
Yeah.
Don't run from your own thoughts, but learn to listen. But also, don't identify with the thoughts, because the thoughts are not you. It's the ego. It's the mind. It's just doing what it's doing. So be curious about it. What's it issuing? And then eventually we can learn to rewrite that dialogue so that it serves us better and doesn't harm us or sabotage or perpetuate suffering.
Yeah. Well said.
Yes.
All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of Navigating the Healing Path podcast. We are very excited to share that next week's episode will be the finale of season 2 of talking about coping mechanisms and healing strategies. We are going to end this season with the topic of sharing our gifts, of sharing our light with the world, and I guess our journeys of how we've grown and learned and made space for our light to shine through. So, yeah, just want to end it on a nice, fun, positive, light, loving note.
Because that's the outcome. That's the outcome of using all these tools, and healing is so that we can embody our light and be the gift to the world. Because everybody is a gift. We all have gifts. And this helps us to uncover it and then be so courageous as to share it. So yeah, I look forward to next week.
Me too.
All right, we'll see you guys then.
All right.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yep. And in the meantime, if anybody wants more content from us, you can find us on Patreon, link in the description, or you can go to patreon.com/NTHP podcast, all lowercase. But thank you. Have a great week.
Bye.